Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Lapre.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, episode number 29. I'm your host, Kim Lapre, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. I really appreciate you coming out and hanging out with me today. I have a really good episode for you about a topic that a lot of us are going to encounter at some point in our career. We can't avoid that. But first, a couple things I wanted to take care of. I wanted to give a shout out to my mom and dad, who I know are listening to this podcast. Hi, Mom and Dad. Thank you for your support. And for those of you that come back every single week, I really appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. You're giving me encouragement that the stuff that I'm putting out there is valuable. And so for those of you that haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to just, go on your phone or whatever you're using to listen to this and just hit subscribe. That way you don't miss a thing. It will be delivered directly to you and it'll just show up on your device whenever I put out a new podcast episode every single Monday. Otherwise, you might miss out on some of this really valuable content that I talk about every single week. Okay, so for today's episode, I wanted to dive into angry parent emails. And I know that at some point, like I said in the introduction, we're all going to get emails with parents who are disgruntled about something that we've done. A lot of times it has to do with grades, especially in the secondary level. They want to know why their student is not doing well, why their student got this score on a test. And then at the elementary level, a lot of times it has to do with behavioral issues. They might think that you're being unfair. But either way, you're inevitably going to receive one or more of these emails at some point in your career. So let's be prepared for that so that we can handle it in a pragmatic way where, not necessarily someone's going to win, because rarely in these situations does anybody win, but you don't lose face, but you also don't lose that valuable relationship with the parents. And then you also don't have a student who's humiliated by this entire situation. Now, I'm going to give you a list of these suggestions in my show notes, which you can find on whichever device you're listening on, or you can also go to teachersneedteachers.com/29. Okay, so why do we get angry parent emails? As I mentioned before, a lot of times it has to do with grades or behaviors. Sometimes at the elementary level, if you send notes home or if you had to keep a student in during lunch or recess, sometimes parents think that you're picking on their student, and so they're going to send you an email where they're disgruntled about it. And again, for the secondary level, the majority of the emails that I receive have to do with grades, or I've also received emails about homework or just any of my policies. Why did I mark their student tardy? Or just something like that, just something that they are concerned about. In my experience, I've made some mistakes in terms of how I've responded to these, but there are quite a few things that I've learned along the way so that I don't make the situation worse, but I can still be clear and stand my ground if need be, or compromise also. That's always a great solution. And so that also my administration will back me up, because the worst thing is to reply to a parent outlining, your policies, and you're very clear about it and you stand your ground, and then have your administration turn around and say, no, you need to do what the parent asks. So following these steps can really help you so that you're not stuck in this lose-lose situation and create a lot of anxiety and resentment towards the parent and your administrator. So the first thing you want to do, because a lot of times when you get these emails, you want to reply with, an angry message as well. Just instinctively, we feel attacked. So sometimes you want to attack back, or we freak out thinking we're going to get in trouble. So you need to think clearly first, and you need to first investigate the issue that the parent is upset about. So if they're saying, my student got this grade, or you held my student in for recess, you want to double check. Maybe they're right. Maybe you made a mistake in their grade. I've done that before. I've put the wrong score for a student and I quickly fixed it and said, oh, you know what? I'm really sorry about that. That was my mistake. Their grade is fixed. So first check and see if you actually did make a mistake. And if you did, fix it. Easiest solution. Don't get defensive. Don't get snarky about it. Just admit you were wrong. We're human. You don't lose face in terms of how the parents feel about you. At the end of the day, they just really want what's best for their students. And you can understand that. The second thing that you want to do, and this can be a little bit difficult, is you want to take a moment to understand the parent's perspective. So seek to understand before being understood. I'm sure you've heard that before. So you may be the first or the 12th teacher that has given that student a failing grade, but that parent is still going to feel very protective of their child. Even if they know that their child is messing up in your class, isn't doing the best that they could, they can't help but almost feel this desperation to just help them get what they need so that they can succeed. You know, there may even be some circumstances that affect how much the parent can help their student. Maybe they work 2 jobs and they can't be there to give some accountability to their student. Or, you know, maybe they live in poverty and it's a chaotic home situation. Or maybe they are a very affluent family, but the parents have to work a lot. And so the student is sort of on their own to figure things out. So either way, what I suggest is that you put yourself in their shoes for a moment and get some clarity. Try to find out some background information and not automatically become defensive or indignant. And just really try to focus on clearing up whatever misunderstandings are there. So take a look at what you wrote or what you did that set them off. So maybe you sent out an email to all of the parents and somehow that triggered a response from a parent. You know, if you were in their shoes, would you have reacted that way if you received that? And that's actually kind of hard to get that kind of objectivity, but you have to really try hard to think from a parent's perspective. So what do you need to clarify and what information do you need to give them so that they can gain an understanding and feel some closure on the situation? So maybe there were just gaps in what they know and they jump to conclusions and you just need to clear things up. So again, just remember that at the end of the day, these parents are really just looking out for their student. You just really have to reframe whatever it is that they're saying or doing and just remember that they want the best for their child. So the next thing you want to do is have another colleague take a look at the email that they sent you. So, you know, you need to find someone who you know is calm and level-headed. I wouldn't necessarily go straight to your administrator on this. I would have a colleague take a look at it and get their take on it. Explain the situation as objectively as possible, and then let them decide on their own. Don't try to persuade them by saying, oh, this parent has been this way, or this student. Just tell them what's going on. Try to be very objective so that they can make their own decision and decide if the parent is jumping to conclusions, if the parent actually has a valid point, or if both of you are just seeing things differently and it needs to be clarified. I actually had a situation where I wish that I had had somebody take a look at an email that I received from one of my daughter's teachers. I was under the impression that they had to do this assignment at home using Google Slides, which I do know how to do, but I also felt that as a teacher and as a parent, I shouldn't have to teach that to my daughter. It should be the responsibility of her teacher. It shouldn't be something that becomes parent homework. That's actually something that drives me a little nuts. Elementary school teachers is when parents get homework. Okay, but that's beside the point. So I was upset because I read the email as it's up to the parent to show the students how to use PowerPoint or how to use Google Slides. And I thought, well, what if a parent doesn't know how to use that? What if I don't have access to that? I thought it was really unfair to ask that of parents. And so I replied with this long, very verbose, educational sounding email about how wrong it was and how I was going to show my daughter how to do this, but I shouldn't have to. And I'm only doing it because I care about her education and I shouldn't have to teach their class. Oh my goodness. I just really wish that I hadn't sent that. I wish I had saved it and looked at it again later, but I did it. I was very upset at the moment and I sent it. Now, come to find out later on that they were actually going to work on those skills in class, how to use PowerPoint and Google Slides, and that I had read the email incorrectly. Had I asked my husband or just anybody else to look at it, I'm sure they would have seen my own misunderstanding. So in the same way, when you read this email from the parent, you're going to feel attacked. And I know that when I get these types of emails, I almost can't even read it word for word. My eyes sort of skim over it. It becomes this block of words that I can't even really absorb. And I just know that I'm having a moment here. I'm feeling this anger. And it comes to the point where I can't even process it. So get a second pair of eyes, because you want someone who's going to tell you the truth and not just commiserate with you or tell you about their experience. You just want someone to tell you what they see in terms of this exchange via email. Okay, so the next thing you want to do, you're probably going to feel compelled to reply with an angry email. Don't necessarily stifle that urge, because you need to get it out. You need to vent. You need to feel some catharsis here. And I have definitely crafted these emails after my past experience where I wrote that mean email. But I've crafted these emails where I just have this really indignant, angry reply to the parent. And then I save it somewhere, or I type it somewhere that isn't via email. So I don't hit reply, because you might accidentally hit send. I'll type it in a Google Doc. I'll type it in a Word document somewhere else so that I can just get it all out. I can vent, and there's no harm in doing that. So if you really feel compelled to do it, type it somewhere else, and it just feels really good to get it off your chest. And after that, walk away and do something else. Do not send it, but just know that you were able to be heard, or maybe have that friend or colleague who read the parent's reply, have them read it. And, if that'll make you feel better that somebody actually saw it, but just don't send it. Seriously, do not send it. Nothing good ever comes out of this. And I have to tell you, over the years, I've had colleagues who have actually sent those replies to parents. They dig their heels in. They become very indignant. They feel good about being snarky back with the parent. And nobody wins in that situation. And actually, they end up being called into a parent-teacher conference. And sometimes administrators, their hands are tied because of the way that the teacher replied, because it was so unprofessional. And so how can you have your administrator back you up on this? Even though you're right, the tone and the way that the teacher wrote it made it where they're sort of stuck in the middle, because they know that they have to address the fact that the teacher was unprofessional. So just don't send it. Don't do it. These teachers, again, who dig their heels in and decide that it feels so good to send these nasty replies, you will be in that conference room all the time. And you may feel the need to be right, and you may be right. But it doesn't mean that you get to be unprofessional no matter how much the parent is attacking you. You're not going to win. So your administrator is going to see you in a negative light, even if you're right. The parent is definitely going to see you in a negative light, and they may even talk to other parents who might decide to make your life miserable as well. And then think about the student. They are in the middle of all this. Sometimes parents just send off these emails and the students beg them to not do it because it's not a big deal. And they just feel so much humiliation and dread knowing that their parent is doing this. On the other hand, there are also students who want their parent to get involved and, they don't like you and they decide that they want to get back at you. But if you give them that angry reaction and you end up in the principal's office with this parent, that student has won. It's one of those things where you really have to craft it carefully so that you can still stand your ground and be clear while maintaining your professional composure. Okay, you need to come out as the one who is calm and collected and right. Probably you want to be right, as opposed to just another belligerent person in the situation. Okay, so the next thing you want to do after you've received it, you've read it, you had another colleague read it, then you want to give your administrator a heads up. There's always a chance that the parent is going to go to the administrator after they've unloaded this email on you. So you want to be sure that your principal knows your side of the story. If you can get them that side of the story sooner than later, then it's better. Hopefully you have an administrator that says, well, I'm going to ask Mrs. So-and-so what happened and I will get back to you, as opposed to just automatically siding with the parent. So the sooner you can address this, the better. Okay, you need to put aside your pride and don't keep it to yourself because you think you'll get in trouble. You can actually get in more trouble if you don't tell them about it. And I've actually had several administrators who were very grateful that I told them about it, so that when the parent eventually did come to them, they knew both sides of the story, they knew the history of it, and they were able to back me up while also finding a way to make the parent happy. Because ultimately, I think we know a lot of times our administrators are going to find a way to make parents happy because they don't want angry parents. So if your administrator, though, is sidelined and they have to deal with the parent with no prior knowledge, just know it's going to make you look bad. You're definitely going to look bad in their eyes. And as a new teacher, you don't want that to happen. And you might end up being even in more trouble because the principal has to defend you without knowing any information. So as soon as you get a belligerent parent, someone who's personally attacking or threatening you in an email or a phone call, then you need to document it and just forward it to your principal. And you definitely want to keep meticulous notes and record keeping when an incident like this happens. That way, if something happens again, then, we can talk about whether or not this is harassment. Every parent has a right to be upset. Every person has a right to be upset, but that doesn't give parents the right to be abusive. Okay, next. No matter what, and I've mentioned this before, you're going to have to respond. You can't just leave it there and say, I'm just going to let it go away and ignore it, because again, then the parent's going to go to your administrator and say, I was concerned about this and Mr. So-and-so didn't care. So you have to respond, but you need to stay cool and calm and professional. The best thing actually that you can do is reply in a very objective, matter-of-fact, here are the facts way, and not use any colorful, descriptive language that shows emotion. That way, you are the one who's level-headed, and the parent is the one who looks like they're crazy. Not that I want a parent to look like they're crazy, but you know what I mean. So don't send an email that you wouldn't want to receive. Let me say that again. Don't send something that you would want to receive. Don't decide that you are going to get back at them, that you're going to, somehow seek revenge against them. Okay? You don't have to let them walk all over you and mistreat you, but this is not a time to fight fire with fire. So you're not going to gain anything, like I said before, by attacking back. You're going to lower yourself to their level. And if they decide to get their pack of friends to be mad at you, it could be something that lasts a long time if they have future students coming to your school. So you may have won that battle, or you may feel like you won that battle by replying in a snarky and upset way, but you're sort of stuck with the fallout for years to come. So just suck it up, reply objectively, and be very matter-of-fact, and just get it over with. Okay? And after you craft that email, save it as a draft and come back to it when you're no longer upset. And don't wait days, try to reply within 24 to 48 hours, but put it aside and come back when you're calm. Because here's the thing. You need to give yourself some distance and read it with the lens of, what do I want to accomplish? What is my end goal with this email? And you need to be honest with yourself about this. Because, with our different personalities, some of us just want to make the parent go away and some of us want to be right. So if you're someone who's like, I want to win, and you have to get the last word, you're probably going to ruin any possibility of the parent cooperating with you in the future. And again, think about the student. It could create tension with that student. they're going to end up hearing the parent saying bad things about you. And that could actually really be awkward if the student likes you. I've had that situation and I felt really bad for the student. So all I did was I just treated the student just like normal. And I was just very matter of fact with the parent, and I didn't get emotional about it. Now, if you do want to win, how far are you willing to take it? I mean, is it really worth having to go to a parent-teacher conference with your principal? Is it really worth the hassle of receiving a barrage of angry follow-up emails? What if this parent wants to take it up with superintendent? Do you really want to have your name and reputation dragged through the mud because you had to have the last word? That's something we don't always think about. We think it's just going to be over. But parents have been known to just go straight to the top, not even talk to the principal. They go straight to the superintendent. And now the superintendent knows your name, not because of the amazing things that you do in your classroom, but because of an angry email. So you want to handle this delicately, again, not so that the parent can walk over you, but because it's not going to be worth it at the end of the day. Will that email in any way benefit you 5 years from now? Okay? Just because you felt like you had to have the last word. And finally, do you really want the parent to understand your point of view? And so if you just want to clear it up and have it be done and over with, you need to take away any language that communicates you being defensive. So, if you really didn't do anything wrong, then just be matter of fact about it. If they are complaining about your late policy, you could reply with, I understand that my late policy may be unclear, so here's another copy of it for your reference. And I think it would really help Johnny out if you and I came up with a plan to help him get those assignments on time so that this won't happen in the future. That kind of reply, you're going to diffuse the situation. The parent will see the policy in writing, and hopefully you've had them sign it previously. You don't want to bring that card out yet until it gets to that point. You don't want to say, well, you signed it, so you have to follow it. Again, be diplomatic. And if you notice how I came up with a suggestion on how we can fix the problem so it doesn't happen again. So in a way, I've communicated that no, I'm not going to change the grade because this is my policy. But I understand that maybe he's struggling with getting assignments in on time. So how can we help him? Offer a solution so that the parent feels validated, they feel heard, and they feel like you empathize with what's going on. Because I'm going to tell you now, if you're not a parent or guardian, it's really hard to get them to work sometimes. It's not like just because I'm the parent or guardian that I can make my child do whatever I want. We know better than that, especially when we get to those teenage years and we get all of the pushback. And so I could nag and bug and ground and take away all these things and give all these consequences, but it doesn't ensure that my child is going to do what they need to do to succeed. So we can't just blame the parents for bad parenting because they could be pulling their hair out at home trying to make this happen. So what can we do on our end to help them out? What can we do on our end? Because it's easier if the student succeeds in our class, isn't it? Isn't it better that you work with the parent than you work against the parent? Because then you're going to have a student who's failing, who hates school, who hates his parent, who hates his teacher. So don't be part of that situation. So after you've received this email and probably before you've replied, don't blame or lecture the student the next day. So even if that student said negative things to the parents about you, they cannot control how their parents respond. I mean, think about it. We're adults. We're going to do what we want to do. So I can tell you that most of the time, they don't want their parent to say anything or get involved, and they're so embarrassed when the parents do get involved. It's not fair to take it out on that student or act differently about them because their parent sent you a nasty email. So, I have heard of students purposely getting their parents upset and riled up in order to get a teacher in trouble. This hasn't happened to me, but if it did, I would still choose to be the adult in the room, and I would prove that the student is wrong. So you definitely don't want to prove them right. And if you engage in this email to email content, you're going to validate the student's claims. So just think about that. If they say that you're unprofessional, you're a bad teacher, you're mean, you pick on them, and you get into this email war with their parent, guess what? That's exactly what you look like. So keep the student out of it in terms of the back and forth. Yes, this is still about the student and we want them to be successful, but don't take it out on them. Now, another thing that we definitely want to do is find a way to prevent this issue from popping up again. I'm not implying that you did something wrong. I've just had parents who are upset because their job is miserable and they wanted to take it out on me, or their home life is miserable, or they're in a court battle over custody with, their ex. I get it. And sometimes students have lied about something I said or did so that they won't get in trouble. Now, that's common. So if they're in trouble because of a bad grade, then they'll lie about it. They'll say that I was somehow unfair or I didn't teach it to them, and so that's why they failed. So after the parents would send me an email like that, like my student said that, you didn't really teach this material thoroughly and they didn't really know it, and already you're testing them on this. I demand to see a copy of the test so that I can work on this with my student. Well, that's just the student saying that because they failed because they didn't study. So when I reply to something like that, I just calmly and very diplomatically shed light on the truth. And you know what? Those students don't do that again. Once I not necessarily call them out and call the student a liar, but I just say, you know what, on this day and this day, we did do this, and then we reviewed this way. I sent it home. We did another review before the test, et cetera, et cetera. And usually the parents handle it from there. But if they continue to misinterpret your message or intentions, then maybe you need to reevaluate your approach and your tone and how you word those emails. If one parent complains now, you can count on more complaining in the future if you repeat that type of email again. Now, finally, if you're delivering unhappy news, have another colleague take a look at it. So again, we want someone to kind of check it, someone who's not in our head. So let's say that you've survived an angry parent email incident. Awesome. So let's make sure we don't do this again. At this point, you're probably going to want to take some preventative measures so that you don't set off parents in the future, which is actually easy to do. So if you're sending like an announcement or an email that could be construed as negative, like, oh, nobody studied for a test, or remember to do your homework, or guess what, you have detention tomorrow. You want to run it by a colleague because there's so much to be said about tone and delivery, especially through email. I think we know this, whether it be text or email or even, on social media. People don't necessarily understand your tone and mood when you're writing it out, unless you want to put a lot of emojis on there to try to get your point across. Okay. And we may unwittingly offend someone. We didn't realize we did it. One time I made the mistake of putting a few words in all caps. Not the whole sentence, but a few words. And the parent replied and said, "Why are you yelling at me over email?" And I thought, oh my goodness, that's not my intent. I was emphasizing a point, but then I remembered, you know what? All caps usually does signal yelling, but that really wasn't my intent. So I just apologized and I explained to them that it was a mistake and this was my intention. And then we cleared it up. Now, if you tend to get angry parent emails and complaints, there's probably a problem with the tone of your communication, either to the students or parents. So just take some precautions and have someone take a quick look at the message. I've actually had to do this for other teachers before. I had a colleague who was constantly upsetting parents and colleagues, like within our school, with her emails. And so I would read them. I'd say, you know what? You got to let me proofread these before you send them out because your tone sounds really stuck up or indignant or know-it-all. And that rarely goes over well. So after a few times of editing her emails, she kind of understood how her tone was being misconstrued. And so she started to kind of change the way that she wrote so that it was a little more calm and a little more friendly and agreeable. Not that everything has to be roses, but at the same time, there's so much that you can do to avoid these situations. So the final thing that I want to say about this is that in these incidences where I've received these emails, I've decided that I'm going to be not necessarily the better person, but I'm going to be professional. Always. I always make my priority to put the students' needs first. So regardless of what is happening with this parent and how they feel about me, or they feel about the way I teach or the way I grade or my policies, at the end of the day, I'm here to serve my students and make sure that they're learning and succeeding and feel emotionally safe in my classroom. So keep your why in mind also whenever you're deciding how you're going to deal with an angry email. And of course, pay attention to these tips that I've given you and take the time to go through these steps so that you don't make the situation worse. Okay, so that was a lot, and I hope you got a lot of value out of that. Could be an episode that maybe you bookmark or save so that in the future, if you do get an angry parent email, you know how to deal with it in a way that you save face, the parent feels understood, and your administrator is completely blown away by how well you handled the situation. So if you enjoyed today's episode and you got a lot out of it, why don't you subscribe? Or even better, leave me a rating and review. I promise you it doesn't take that long, and it would let me know how I can improve the podcast or give me a digital pat on the back so that I know that I should keep doing what I'm doing. And if you want all of the different steps that I outlined, there's 10 of them, then just go to the show notes at teachersneedteachers.com/29, or on whatever podcast player you're on. It has the show notes below. And if you have a question that you'd like me to answer on the podcast, I would love it if you'd email me at kim@teachersneedteachers.com. Have a fabulous week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.